I wanted to like this show. I really did. And I have enjoyed parts of it, but I don't understand it. It's like every single idea that comes into the writers' heads just makes it into the final script with absolutely no refinement. After episode 3 spent the vast majority of its runtime on Pershing and Kane, you think we'd see them again in the next episode, but you'd be wrong. This show was so desperate to introduce us to that storyline that it interrupted Bo and Din's story for almost 40 minutes last week, but this week we don't see Coruscant at all, because reasons. I'm not complaining that we get more Mandalorian time, I'm simply noting that the show isn't remotely consistent with its pacing and is completely incompetent when it comes to managing audience expectations. What's the main plot point for Bo and Din right now? Bo adjusting to life under the way? That's not a plot, that's a minor character development. Who or what is the antagonist? What is the overarching struggle? What are the objectives of the main characters? I can't answer any of these questions. Beyond what? Din teaching Grogu to be a Mandalorian? Again, that's not a plot. That's fairly minor character development. If you can answer those questions, please enlighten me. So we don't have a central plot, and thus things just happen. Like this Mandalorian training day where they shoot their rockets into the water because I guess rockets are free and unlimited? Could the set designers at least have had a bunch of targets set up somewhere? Seeing someone shoot into a big body of water isn't exactly interesting. Display the skill of the Mandalorians rather than the simple fact that they have weapons and spend time training. Training for what? I guess just to keep sharp? It's not like they're preparing to retake Mandalore, which could at least be something interesting to think about, but I don't know, maybe we'll get there at some point, but the show has not yet indicated that Bo-Katan has won them over to her cause. It hasn't indicated that she's tried to at all, or really even that she wants to anymore. Grogu gets to train too, and while I appreciate the show is trying to have Grogu doing things, he's just not interesting. He can't talk, his face can barely express emotion, and that makes for a very poor character. He's really not a character, he's just a puppet. This scene with him and the Mando kid was just boring. Grogu has no idea what he's doing. Din tells him to believe in himself. Grogu does the one trick the puppet masters of the show have come up with, and that's the scene. Why did he get to shoot the Mando kid 3 times in one round when the Mando kid only got to shoot him once per round? What's going on here? There's just no logical consistency. It's just kind of like, hey, here's a thing that's happening. It's pointless. I did love one part of this scene though. When Grogu gets hit a second time, the splatters are right at the same height on his chest, and then 10 seconds later, one of them has noticeably shifted down a couple inches, which on Grogu's chest is a pretty long way. What, did they look too much like nipples at first, but you didn't want to bother cutting this shot out? Obviously, this is a pretty small point, but when you insist on zooming in on Grogu and his expressionless face every 5 seconds, stuff like this is noticeable. It stands out to the audience. And it just makes the creators look lazy, like they don't care to fix obvious discrepancies. Creators should care about little details like this. When your story is examined more closely, those details should stand out in a good way, should make the audience appreciate the story even more, not make them roll their eyes at your laziness. Attention to detail matters. Continuing on with the plot, a pterodactyl appears, and despite the vast display of weaponry from 30 seconds ago, nobody shoots at it. And this is despite the fact that, as we learn later, this thing has done this before. How stupid exactly are the Mandalorians? They let this thing carry off one of their kids and feed it to its babies, and they didn't bother, I don't know, taking any measures at all to ensure that doesn't happen again. Sensors, turrets, sentries, nothing. No, just gonna let it fly in and grab a snack whenever it feels like it. So now they have to go after it, but they can't use their jetpacks to reach it.
If we use jetpacks, the beast will hear.
It would kill the child.
Remember that. So there's our plot for the episode. Instead of an actual antagonist, we have a bird with hungry kids. Delightful. Oh, but wait, it's flashback time. Why? To what end? Anyway, here's 4 Jedi losing to a grand total of maybe 8 clone troopers? I can't really tell. The cinematography is so cramped and of course keeps cutting to Grogu for no reason whatsoever. How incompetent are these Jedi exactly? They're all adults as far as I can tell, so they've got to be at least Jedi Knights. How do 2 of them die when facing down clone troopers advancing at them 2 at a time through a narrow doorway? 1 Jedi should easily be able to hold this position like the Spartans from 300. 4 Jedi is overkill, and yet 2 of them drop dead while only killing 2 clone troopers because I guess they suck at their jobs? And then once her companions die, this Jedi just casually saunters away, despite the fact that she's still getting actively shot at by the clones who are still very much alive, and then this other Jedi joins her. What happened to those 2 remaining clones and the ones in the smoke behind them? Don't know. Why don't the Jedi charge these clones that pop into the hallway from off-screen and easily kill them at close range? Don't know. How does the male Jedi die? Oh wait, no, I do know that one. He dies off screen. Why do only 2 of these 4 clone troopers who have a clear shot at Grogu who's just sitting there actually bother discharging their weapons? Don't know. Seriously, how hard is it to competently direct an Order 66 scene? Could you not afford a few dozen extras to show how the Jedi get overwhelmed by the clones' numbers, and thus actually respect the Jedi's abilities? This action scene makes it seem like 1 Jedi is about as valuable in combat as 1 clone, and that's just stupid. This scene also doesn't display the skill of the 501st. There's no coordination or superior tactics that outmaneuver the Jedi. The clones just walk at the Jedi while shooting, and the Jedi die rather quickly. It's cheap and bland. It doesn't respect even the basics of Star Wars lore. Then after Jar Jar shows up and demonstrates what Jedi are actually capable of, he and Grogu fly around to get chased by a couple of LAT gunships, which of course cannot aim. Even when they enter a tunnel with 0 maneuvering room, flying in a straight line, they magically just don't get hit. Look, I get that bad guys miss. It's what they do. They miss all the time. Okay, fine. But at least in the last episode, Bo-Katan was weaving around rocks and making tight turns, not flying in a straight line with absolutely nowhere to dodge. This LAT gunner should be fired. Well, I guess this train saved the Empire the trouble. Really? Really, you're gonna make a reference to your previous episode. Is that the fan service people want? Really? So Grogu and Jar Jar meet up with some friends from Naboo, because why not? Then an LAT shows up and blows their escape ship sky high. Oh, wait, no, it lands and dispatches its troopers. Why? Why would it not simply use any of its multitude of armaments to blow the Jedi, the ship, and the entire landing platform into the stratosphere? Is this particular ship concerned about the Empire's public image? Did Order 66 suddenly get modified to avoid civilian property damage? Did no one in the writer's room think to say, hey, maybe the ships that have been shooting at them this whole chase scene should continue shooting here? What nonsense. This flashback lasted barely 4 minutes, and it managed to display so many problems I have with Disney Star Wars, especially when it comes to the action scenes. They're fluff. Things just happen for no particular reason, regardless of what logically should happen. There's absolutely no emotional or narrative weight to the scene. We don't know any of these characters with Grogu, and we don't magically care about them because they're Jedi. This scene adds the how to Grogu's surviving Order 66 story, but that doesn't really change anything. We already knew he witnessed Order 66, and that's the thing, he just witnessed it. Unlike other Jedi who survived, he didn't actually do anything. He didn't have to run away from his mission or duty. He didn't have to fight his former friends. He just got dragged from A to B to C and happened to survive. So who really cares how it happened? Are we expected to anticipate Master Jar Jar being important later? Really? Getting back to the main plot, if you can call it that, our Mandalorian hunting party is after the pterodactyl, and Bo-Katan reminds them.
We'll continue on foot from here. Any closer and it will hear the ship.
We know this. This has already been explained to both us and to the Mandalorians. Please stop telling us stuff we already know. Trust us at least a tiny bit, please. The best part of the episode, and I'm being serious right now, is probably right here when all the Mandalorians scatter to eat, because I guess it's hard to eat with those buckets on, and they don't want to get kicked out of the club. Bo-Katan removes her helmet and looks around and naturally finds that she's all alone. There's actual subtext here. She may be a part of their covert, but she still does not love their ways. She finds them lonely and isolating. Sharing food, talking, and bonding over a meal is a near ubiquitous human experience, and yet it's one thing these Mandalorians can never do due to their customs. There's actual emotional weight behind this one look of Bo-Katan's as she experiences this firsthand. In that moment, it seems like the writers actually trust the audience, that they actually have confidence in their own abilities to convey characters' thoughts and feelings without them having to say anything. And yet, in the very next scene, Bo-Katan once again tells the Mandalorians and the audience things we already know, things that are obvious to everybody.
Our best bet is stealth. Our jetpacks will alert it to our presence.
It will kill the foundling if attacked. It has happened before when it has taken others.
Remember this. Hey, you know how grappling hooks and lines work in Star Wars, right? I mean, it's been around for ages. The Phantom Menace had a bunch of Naboo guards or soldiers use grapple guns to basically fly up to an upper level. So naturally, when unable to use their jetpacks, the Mandalorians will use their grappling hooks and lines built into their wrist launchers to swiftly and silently ascend the mountain. Except they won't. They'll use them as safety lines while they manually rock climb up this sheer face. Are you serious? These things can pull their users up against gravity, right? I mean, if Naboo has access to these self-retracting grappling lines, surely a warrior culture like the Mandalorians would have the same technology. But no, we need to have a scene of them climbing hand over hand up this cliff, because even in an episode that barely grazes half an hour, we need to pad out the runtime, apparently. This is how you know the writers are just running out of ideas. And their grappling lines absolutely do work like they should, like we expect them to. Bo-Katan uses one later to grapple onto the pterodactyl near the end of that scene. They simply choose not to use them here because the writers had to fill another few minutes. Anyhow, they finally reach the top. Din uses his thermal vision to identify a heat source, but surprise, it's not the Mando kid, it's 3 pterodactyl babies, and look who just showed up with breakfast, which is still warm and wriggling. Wait, what was that thing doing all this time? When the pterodactyl paid its visit to the Mandalorian vending machine, it was evening at the latest, and now it's at least 12 hours later. We know it came back to its nest because Bo-Katan followed it here. So was it just flying around all night with Mando Kid in its beak? Why did it not immediately feed the kid to its babies? How is that kid still alive after all this time? And why did the pterodactyl choose this moment to show up? Oh, right, yeah. Because. Silly me, asking questions about logic. Speaking of logic, remember how it was repeatedly said, drilled into our brains, that they couldn't use jetpacks or attack the pterodactyl or it would kill the foundling? Well, they do both, and it doesn't. Further evidence for Mandalorian incompetence, I guess. The thing just flies around with a kid in its claws getting shot at by the Mandalorians with whatever's from their wrist until Bo-Katan grapples to it because these things do work like that and takes it out. But not before it knocks off one of her pauldrons because it knows that's going to be important for her character later. Anyhow, the kid is fine, the Mandalorians all live, and they get 3 new pets. Truly a riveting plot. But we're not quite done yet. We get to see the armorer make a breastplate for Grogu, and it's a circle. Why is it a circle? Whose torso is that shape? That makes almost as little sense as the chainmail that he's wearing, but whatever. Good for Grogu, I guess. Finally, and I mean finally now, Bo-Katan asks for a new pauldron with the insignia of the mythosaur and tries to tell the armorer that no, she really did see one, and the armorer doesn't really seem to care. Once again, there's maybe some actual subtext here. The scene isn't exactly what I would call well written. Each line is pretty basic and straightforward, but it might be hinting at how the Watch doesn't really even believe in the mythosaur, while Bo-Katan obviously now does. What implications this might have aren't super clear. Maybe that the Watch doesn't really believe in their own religion, they just follow the customs. But again, that isn't sufficient for a plot. This is just a small development for Bo-Katan's character. Such developments are only truly interesting when they are part of a larger whole, which, as of right now, this show is severely lacking. Well, that's episode 4, or part 20, or whatever you want to call it. It was half the length of its predecessor, barely managed to build on a fourth of that episode's plot, provided us with some very fluffy action that wouldn't have been out of place in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and just generally confused me as to its purpose. I have no idea what these writers are doing or why. The show is so inconsistent and this episode just felt pointless. I really do want to like this show. I love Star Wars, and it sucks when Star Wars sucks, but I just didn't like this episode, and I am becoming unmotivated to continue watching this show. Let me know how you felt about it down below. Hit the YouTube buttons if you want to hear more of my thoughts in the future, and yeah, that'll do it. Thanks for watching.